Charlotte Motor Speedway. 7:40 in the morning. Fog still hanging on the cold asphalt. Brody Keene finishes 3 warm-up laps, pulls into pit lane, kills the engine. He sits 30 seconds before he lifts his helmet, shakes his head once, does not speak. The backup driver climbs in. Half a lap. He walks out of the car with hands shaking. Trent Vauclair shouts into the radio. The radio stays quiet. Margot Halloran turns to her lead driver. What's the real reason? Brody just looks at her. 20 meters back, behind the pit fence, stands the man her company refused to pay. Before we go back to the morning that broke every rule in the shop, take a second to subscribe. This story earns its ending, and you will not want to miss what the cameras catch when no one expects it. 30 days earlier, in a single-bay garage on the edge of Statesville, North Carolina, Sutton Wilder signed for a flatbed delivery that filled half his shop. The car was a stock frame chassis, brand new last season, totaled the week before in a sponsored test incident at Rockingham. The Halloran Motorsports paperwork said 30 days, $47,000, no extensions. The contract was signed Halloran Motorsports, Mooresville, North Carolina, and countersigned by the team principal, Margot Halloran. Sutton had not heard the name until it appeared at the bottom of the page. He had heard of her father. Everyone in the sport had. He initialed the page without looking at the timeline. It was the biggest contract he had taken in 2 years. His son Jonah sat on the high stool by the workbench, 8 years old, sketching pistons in a notebook he kept open to the back. He had drawn cylinders since he could hold a pencil straight. Sutton checked the boy's lines without saying so, then tapped one with the eraser end. Wear pattern there. That ring's been seating uneven. Jonah erased the line and redrew it. The first week, Sutton worked the body. The second week, the drivetrain. He played the radio low, classic country, the kind Eleanor used to leave on in their old kitchen. Jonah came after school and on Saturdays. He did not ask questions Sutton would not have answered. In the third week, Sutton pulled the suspension. He laid the right side arm across the bench under the lamp and stopped moving. He knew the failure mode. He had written about it once. The microfracture pattern ran along the upper joint, same place, same tolerance error, same vendor stamp. 7 years had passed since he had last seen it, and the vendor had not corrected the design. Sutton stood there a long time. The radio played a song Eleanor had liked. He did not turn it up. He did not turn it down. He just looked at the part. When he sat back at the bench, he opened a clean sheet of grid paper and began drawing the corrected geometry from memory. He did not call Halloran. He did not adjust the contract. The original quote covered a rebuild. What he was about to do was something else. The redesign would cost him about 60 extra hours of his own labor, plus material he would have to absorb. He would not be billing for it. Jonah looked up from his cylinder drawing. "Dad, why are you doing it different?" Sutton kept drawing. "Because the car needs to come home from every track it sees." Jonah considered that. The first one didn't. Sutton's pencil paused. Then it continued. "Some don't." Jonah went back to his drawing. By day 28, the rebuild was finished. The chassis sat under the work lamps with the new geometry. The welds dressed down so cleanly that under good light, the joints almost disappeared. Sutton ran his hand along the right arm and felt nothing he had not put there himself. Day 29, he submitted the invoice. $47,000. The figure on the contract. He noted the additional design work in a small line at the bottom. No charge for the file. 2 hours later, the reply came in from Halloran Accounting. Invoice declined per COO directive. Non-network contractor. Referred to compliance review. Sutton read the email once. He set the phone down on the bench. He looked at the car. He did not call. He had stood in front of larger walls than this one. 5 days before the test session at Charlotte, Margot Halloran sat in the corner office on the second floor of Halloran Motorsports in Mooresville. The smell of her father's old cigars still in the curtains, working through the quarterly cost review. Her eye stopped on a single line. 47,000, declined. Non-network contractor. She picked up the phone. Trent Vauclair answered on the second ring. He had been her father's chief of staff for 19 years. He explained without explaining. A Statesville mechanic, no top-tier ASE certifications, billed at team rate, declined per standard procedure. 2 approved shops were closing the rebuild as a salvage exercise, Margot said. "I'd like to see the car." She walked down to the hangar herself. The crew was rolling the chassis through the wide doors when she arrived. She circled it once, then put her hand on the hood. The weld seams along the front clip were so smooth she had to look twice. The right side arm sat a fraction differently than the factory drawing she had pulled that morning. Not different by accident. Different by intention. Harlan Ridge was standing 2 bays over, pretending to read a clipboard. When she turned, his eyes slid past hers. She filed that. She drove to Statesville that afternoon. Alone. No driver, no assistant, no call to Trent. Sutton Wilder was leaning over a camshaft when she stepped through the open bay door. He did not look up right away. When he did, he said, "You didn't drive 35 minutes to explain why your company won't pay. There's a reason." "That's enough," Margot said. "I didn't come to explain. I came because of the weld seam on the car." Sutton looked at her then. Really looked. They talked for 10 minutes. He did not boast. He did not defend. He walked her through the vendor tolerance failure on the arm and the redesign he had built in. When she asked why he had absorbed the cost, he said, "Because if that car runs its first lap with the original part, there may not be a second lap." Margot did not answer that. She thanked him for his time and turned to leave. That was when she saw the photograph. It was tacked above the file cabinet by the door. Sun faded, 4x6, an old team shot. Calderwood Racing R&D, 2014, back row, third from the left. A younger Sutton stood next to a blonde woman with grease on her cheek. The caption read, in small print, Wilder Chassis Group. Margot stopped. Wilder Chassis Group was a footnote in the racing industry intellectual property case study she had read at Wharton. The chassis dynamics white papers her engineers still quoted in design reviews had been written by a team headed by an engineer named S. Wilder. She did not ask. She walked out to her car. In the driver's seat, she sat for a long minute before she typed his full name into her phone. The first article was from NASCAR Magazine, 2019. Calderwood engineer steps away after wife's fatal test crash. Walks away from sport. Eleanor Wilder, development driver, 31 years old. Margot read the article twice. Her hands were cold. She did not start the car for another half hour. She did not call Trent. When she finally drove back to Mooresville, she took the long route, past the small body shops and the cattle fences, the radio off, the late sun cutting across the dashboard. The man in the photograph was the man who had welded the seam she had touched. She did not know yet what she was going to do. She knew she was going to do something. The next morning, Margot called the Statesville garage and asked Sutton to bring the car to the Halloran R&D bay for a dyno pull. Diagnostic only. Telemetry verification. She did not mention Trent. Sutton said yes. He arrived at 8. Jonah was in the passenger seat. The boys' school had closed for the day for a plumbing failure, and Sutton's regular sitter had a doctor's appointment. He had brought him along because the alternative was not bringing him. Margot met them at the gate herself. She caught a half-second on Jonah, long enough for the boy to put out his hand, formal and steady, and say, "Pleased to meet you, ma'am." She shook his hand without making a thing of it. Then she opened the side door, walked him into the lobby, found the staff lounge, and pulled a small carton of milk from the refrigerator. She set out a plate of the cookies someone had brought in for a birthday. She did not say, "I understand." She did not say single parents are amazing. She did not say any of the lines that would have made Sutton's jaw tighten. She just got the boy seated at the round table with a notebook and a pencil from her own bag. While Sutton went down to the dyno bay with Harlan, Margot sat across from Jonah for 5 minutes. She asked what he was drawing. He showed her report. She said, "Why is it teardrop-shaped instead of round?" Jonah explained flow separation at the radius. He used the term separation point. He was 8. Margot did not pretend to be surprised. She asked, "Your dad teach you that?" Jonah said, "Dad draws it first. I fix it." She caught her own face in the glass of the cabinet behind him. She did not know the expression she was wearing. Down at the dyno bay, Sutton was walking Harlan through the new suspension geometry. Harlan stopped him halfway. "You know this layout was published in an SAE white paper, 2017, Sutton said. "I wrote the white paper." Harlan exhaled and went back to the readings. Trent Vauclair came through the bay doors 20 minutes later without a meeting on the calendar. He saw Sutton. He stopped mid-stride. His voice was tight. This contractor's invoice was declined. He should not be on the floor. Margot came in from the lobby corridor, calm. "He's here at the team principal's invitation. That is still me." Trent looked at her for a long second. He did not raise his voice. He just turned and walked out. There would be consequences. They both knew it. At the end of the day, Sutton walked Jonah to the passenger door of the truck. Margot stood at the entrance to the lobby with her hands in her coat pockets. She did not wave. Sutton backed the truck out, and when it was pointed toward the gate, Jonah turned in his seat and looked back at her through the rear window. Margot, without really deciding to, lifted her hand a few inches. Jonah lifted his back. It was a small thing. A child noticing an adult deciding to be noticed. Sutton, at the wheel, did not see it. Margot stood at the lobby door until the truck cleared the security gate. Then, she went back upstairs to the office that had been her father's and began making a call to a firm she had been thinking about hiring for 2 weeks. She decided on the elevator. By the time she sat down at the desk, she had already dialed. Within 48 hours, Trent had called an ad hoc shareholder meeting with 2 of the older board members. The framing was protective. The team principal had introduced an unverified contractor into the primary competition program. Carolina Petroleum, the lead sponsor, phoned Margot that evening. She did not defend. She listened. She thanked them for the call. She promised an update within the week. When she hung up, she put her phone face down on her father's desk and did not move for a full minute. Then she opened her laptop and confirmed the engagement letter she had signed earlier that afternoon with a forensic accounting firm out of Charlotte. Independent vendor audit. 3 years back. Discreet. The retainer was paid from her personal account. The firm understood the brief. The next morning, Trent sent 2 safety auditors to Sutton's garage in Statesville. They arrived without warning, badges out, looking for code violations. Sutton walked them through the bay without raising his voice. He showed them his certifications, his vendor logs, his current shop inspection. There was nothing to find. One of the auditors, on the way out, paused near the boy sitting on a folding chair by the bench. He said, "Son, you hear a lot when your dad's working?" Sutton put down the wrench. He stepped between the auditor and Jonah. He did not raise his voice. "You can ask me. He is 8. You do not ask him." The auditor took a half step back. The posture closed the conversation. The 2 of them left. Sutton did not say anything to Jonah about it. He finished the head he was working on, washed up, and drove the boy across town to the small pizza place they liked. Over the booth, Jonah did not ask about the men. He asked, "Is Miss Margot going to come around again?" Sutton said, "Maybe." Jonah nodded once. He did not push. In the truck on the way home, Sutton turned the radio to the country station Eleanor had liked. He did not turn it off when the song he remembered came on. Jonah fell asleep against the window. Sutton drove the last 6 miles slow. That same night, Margot was in her father's office past 9. She had the old leather photo album open across her knees, going through the years she had not paid attention to when her father was alive. She found what she had been looking for in the 2018 section. Performance Racing Industry Conference, Indianapolis. Her father shaking hands with a younger Sutton Wilder. On the back of the photograph, in her father's handwriting, 4 lines in pencil. "Best engineer I never hired. Asked 3 times. Respect his answer. Try again next year." Margot set the photograph on the desk. She looked at it for a long time. She understood then that her father had left her something. Not the company, not the building. A standard. She opened her laptop. The email was short. "The test session at Concord is Thursday morning, 7 a.m. 2 of our drivers will be running the car. I would like you there. No reason required. Just be there. Margot." Sutton received the email at 11 that night in the garage in Statesville. He read it. He did not reply. He sat for a while looking at the spot the chassis had occupied for the last 30 days. He had finished the job he was paid for and the job he was not. There was nothing more for him to do in this garage. He knew what was coming. He did not yet know what he was going to do about it. Thursday morning came in cool and damp. The fog still hung along the back stretch of Charlotte Motor Speedway when the Halloran trailer rolled through the infield gate at 6:45. Trent Vauclair was already there. He had spoken to Brody Keene and to Carson at length the night before, separately. The conversations had not been about safety. The conversations had been framed as concern. A non-network contractor, documentation gaps, the kind of legal exposure neither of you needs. By the time the drivers arrived at the track, they were primed. Brody pulled out for 3 warm-up laps. Telemetry came back clean. Tires were up. He brought the car into pit lane and killed the engine. He sat in the cockpit for 30 seconds before he lifted his helmet. When he finally got out, he stood by the door and said, "Steering's lighter than I'm used to. Rear feels alive. Don't trust the feel." Trent said into the radio, "Bring it in." It was already in. Carson, the backup, climbed in next. He was 24 and trying to make a name. He ran half a lap, came in and got out with his hands shaking. "Something under the floor. I don't know. Doesn't feel like one of ours." Neither driver was lying. Sutton had corrected a tolerance flaw the rest of the fleet had been silently compensating for. The car now responded the way the original drawing said it should, to muscle memory built on a flawed baseline. That response felt wrong. Trent had poured doubt over that gap. The drivers had filled it in with refusal. Trent turned to Margot in front of everyone on the pit wall. "This is a depreciating asset. I'm recommending salvage. I've already prepared the documentation." Margot did not answer him. She walked around the car instead. She laid her hand on the hood. She turned, and she looked across the pit lane at Sutton, who was standing outside the barrier in a faded jacket and steel-toed boots. "Do you have anything to say?" Sutton walked over. He did not touch the car. He spoke to Brody, not to her, not to Trent. "Did the rear feel light coming into turn 1 entry?" Brody blinked. "How did you know that?" "Because I corrected the flaw your team has been compensating for with steering input. You aren't wrong. You're driving a new car with old hands." Brody was quiet a long time. Carson looked at the asphalt. Trent cut in. "That's enough. Roll the car back. We're done here." Margot did not look at him. "Nobody touches that car until I say so." The crew stopped where they stood. It was the first time in 6 months she had given an order in her father's voice. She did not raise it. She did not need to. Sutton turned and walked off pit lane before she did. He passed her without looking. She did not call after him. She did not need to do that either. The car stayed where it was on pit lane, alone, the fog burning off in patches. The first real sun of the morning landing on the hood Sutton had welded back into one piece. Behind the pit wall, Harlan Ridge stood with his hands in his coat pockets and watched it. He did not say anything to anyone for a long time. He knew what came next. He had been carrying it in a drawer for 7 years. That evening, Margot sat in her office until the building was empty. At 9, she called Harlan up to the second floor. She did not work toward it. "You knew Sutton at Calderwood. My father knew. I need the part you haven't told me." Harlan stayed quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. "You know I have an NDA. You know Diane is in treatment. The benefits package is a real thing in our house. I'm not asking you to break it. I'm asking you to point me." He thought about it. He looked at her father's photographs on the wall. He stood up. He took her downstairs, past the dark hangar, into the small back office that had been his since 2012. He unlocked the bottom drawer of a metal cabinet. With a key he kept on a separate ring from the others. He pulled out a manila envelope, slid the contents onto the desk, and stepped back. It was not a blueprint. It was an internal memo, dated March 2019, addressed to Calderwood Racing Senior Management. Subject line: Stabilizer, Vendor Failure Risk. Immediate action recommended. Author: S. M. Wilder. Chief Engineer. 3 pages. Test data. Failure modeling. The line Margot's eyes stopped on. Failure could result in catastrophic rear axle loss at speeds above 140 miles per hour. Recommend immediate substitution. At the bottom of page 3, a handwritten response in different ink. Acknowledged. Vendor relationship priority. Continue testing program. The counter-signature was not legible. The date was 4 weeks before Eleanor Wilder died on a development run at Talladega. Harlan said, "I kept a copy. Sutton doesn't know I have it. After the crash, the company destroyed the master internally. I held this one back. Your father knew the document existed. He never asked to see it." Margot read the memo a second time. Her hand stopped on Eleanor's name in the risk analysis section. She did not cry. She folded the pages along their original creases and slid them back into the envelope. "Does Sutton have a right to use this?" Harlan said. "The NDA on him is airtight. But if you hold the document, not him, your counsel can find a way." Margot understood. She put on her coat. She did not go home. At 5:40 in the morning, before the sky had started to gray, she pulled up in front of Sutton's garage in Statesville. The bay light was on. He had not slept. She did not knock. She pushed the side door open and walked in. He was at the bench. his hands black with bearing grease, adjusting a camshaft because his hands needed to be doing something. He looked up when she came in. He was not surprised. She set the envelope on the bench. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened it. He read one line. He read another. Then he sat down on the metal stool beside the bench, slowly, like his legs were no longer quite under him. Margot stood 2 paces back. She did not speak. Through the small window above the workbench, the sky over Statesville began to lighten. Sutton was still holding the memo. He had not moved. After what felt like a long time, he said very quietly, "I forgot what my own handwriting looked like." He did not look up. She did not move closer. She waited. He talked first. He did not work up to it. He spoke the way men speak when they have rehearsed silently for years, and finally let the rehearsed sentences out. He had written the memo 4 weeks before Eleanor's run. Management had acknowledged it and continued. Eleanor had known about the memo. She had read it before he sent it. She had told him to push it. She had agreed to run the scheduled test program anyway, because the calendar would not allow her to step out without losing her seat for the season. She had trusted that he would keep pushing. He had been pushing. He had not been fast enough. He was on the pit wall the day she ran. He had seen what happened from the inside of the timing tower. He stopped there. He did not describe what he had seen. He did not need to. Margot did not say "I'm sorry." She did not speak for the dead, or for the sport, or for her father. She said, "That memo proves you were right. The sport owes you that much," Sutton said. "The sport doesn't owe me anything. Eleanor's gone. The memo doesn't fix that." "No," she said, "but it can fix the car standing in our hangar. Trent has the board meeting on the calendar for noon. He's pushing for liquidation. I need 1 lap that proves the car runs, 1 lap that the board can't argue with. You have 2 drivers. 2 drivers refused. The only person who knows how that car drives is sitting in front of me. I haven't driven in 7 years. She did not beg. She put her hand on the bench, not near his. "I'm not asking for the company. I'm asking because of that memo. If the car runs clean today, the board has to look back at why they didn't run it clean then." That's something Eleanor never got. The line landed. Sutton did not answer. She got up. At the door she said, 7:30, Concord Pit Lane. I won't call again. You come or you don't." She left. He sat at the bench another 20 minutes after the sound of her car was gone. At 6:45, he loaded Jonah into the truck and drove him over to Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor 4 houses down who watched the boy when there was nowhere else. In the truck, Jonah said, "Are you going somewhere today, Dad?" Sutton said, "Maybe." Jonah did not ask the second question. When he climbed down from the truck at Mrs. Patterson's porch, he turned back and said, easy as if he were reminding him about a lunchbox, "Don't forget your seatbelt, Dad." Sutton stopped with one hand on the truck door. That had been Eleanor's line. Every test session, every shakedown. "Don't forget your seatbelt." Jonah had been 1 year old when she said it last. He had no way of knowing. He stood in the driveway a long minute after the front door had closed behind his son. Then he got back in the truck and drove east, toward Concord, toward Charlotte Motor Speedway, toward the chassis he had built and the people who had not believed him. At 7:20, he pulled into the pit lane gate. Harlan was already there. Margot had called him from the garage the night before. The driver's suit Sutton had walked away from in 2019 was on a hanger inside the pit garage. Harlan had kept it in a cabinet at his house for 7 years. It had been cleaned. It still fit. Sutton changed in the back room. When he stepped out, Harlan looked at him once. He did not say anything. He handed him the helmet. Margot arrived at 7:28. She stayed behind the fence. Sutton walked around the car once. He set his hand on the hood. He bowed his head a second. Then he climbed in. The engine came alive in the empty pit lane at 7:30 in the morning. The sound carried up into the empty grandstands. The only people present were Margot, Harlan, 2 technicians Sutton had asked Harlan to pull in, and an SCCA observer Margot had retained the previous afternoon so that the telemetry would carry official weight. No Trent, no press, no drama in the stands. Empty seats, empty corporate suites, the kind of quiet most of these grandstands never see. Sutton ran 2 warm-up laps. He kept the speeds low while the tires came up to temperature. He let the brakes bed. The car responded to inputs in a clean line on the timing screen. No scallops, no hesitations. On the 3rd lap, he opened it up. There was no soundtrack. There was no announcer. There was the engine, the tires, the wind across the open cockpit, and the muted hum of the timing system on the monitor in the pit box. The first corner, the corner Brody and Carson had walked away from, he took at speed. He did not muscle it. He guided it. The car held its line through the apex, swept out wide on the same arc Brody had felt was wrong, and came onto the back stretch carrying speed that Brody had not been willing to commit to. He ran the same line for 3 more laps. The variation across all 4 laps, as measured against the optical sensors on the pit straight, was less than a single foot. By the 5th lap, his time was inside 3% of Brody's qualifying best. He was not chasing the record. He was driving the car as the chassis had been designed to be driven. The telemetry showed the suspension load distribution sitting clean in the design window. The aero balance held steady at 3 different speeds. Harlan, standing next to the data screens, did not need to read the numbers. He had seen Sutton run cars like this before. He was nodding to himself, slowly, the way a man nods when something he had been carrying alone for 7 years is finally being seen by someone else. Sutton came in after 7 laps. He shut the car down. He sat in the cockpit a full minute before he reached up to release his helmet. When he climbed out, his suit was wet through at the collar. He did not look up at the sky. He looked at the steering wheel for a moment, his gloved hand still resting on the rim. Then he let go. A black Cadillac rolled through the pit gate as he was stepping over the wall. Trent Vauclair got out. With him were 2 board members and a corporate attorney. Someone in the crew had called. He came to the timing monitors, looked at the lap data, and read the suspension load curves. He had been in the sport long enough to read them. His face did not pale. It closed. Margot crossed the pit lane to the car. She put her hand on the hood, near the spot Sutton's hand had just left. She looked at him through the windscreen, and what she said was small and clean. "Thank you." Sutton nodded. He did not speak. Harlan put his hand on Sutton's shoulder as he came past. The old crew chief's hand shook a little. Sutton laid his own hand on Harlan's a second. They did not look at each other. It was enough. The car was rolled slowly back toward the paddock. Sutton walked behind it. Margot walked next to him, a meter apart. Trent stood at the timing monitors and watched them go. He had taken out his phone. He had not yet called anyone. At noon, the board met on the 3rd floor of the Halloran building. Trent had put the meeting on the calendar the previous week. His agenda had been to push for liquidation of the rebuilt chassis and to open a review of Margot's competency as team principal. By the time he sat down at the long table, that agenda was already gone. 5 members were present. 2 of Trent's allies. 2 who tended to stay neutral. 1, Geraldine Voss, who had been a friend of Henry Halloran for 40 years. Margot came in last. She brought 3 folders. The first held the SCCA certified telemetry from the morning. The second held the original Halloran rebuild contract, with Trent's declined payment notation in his own initials. The third was the preliminary report from the forensic accounting firm. She did not attack. She presented data. The first folder established that the rebuilt chassis was not a defective asset. Telemetry showed all systems operating inside design parameters. The second folder established that the COO had refused payment to a contractor whose work had measurably improved a team asset, citing only an internal network policy. The third folder, the audit summary, was the difficult one. It showed that across the prior 3 fiscal years, 73% of the vendor contract value had been routed to 3 vendors. 2 of those vendors held minority business interests connected, through an intermediate LLC, to Trent's wife's commercial real estate holdings. The forensic firm had flagged this for further review. They had been clear that the report was preliminary and that 6 more weeks of work would be required before any conclusion could be drawn. Trent did not raise his voice. He argued procedure. He argued due process. He cited the absence of conclusive findings. His 2 allies supported him. Geraldine Voss spoke for the first time at the table that day. She did not address the room. She addressed Trent. "Henry trusted you for 19 years. I would like you to explain that LLC to the board, not to me." Trent did not have a quick answer. The vote that followed was 3-2. Trent was suspended pending completion of the audit. Not removed. Suspended. His 2 allies held their votes. It was governance, not execution. Margot then moved that the original Wilder invoice be paid in full plus a performance bonus calibrated against the morning's telemetry results. The vote on that motion was 5-0. No one on the board, after looking at the data, was prepared to be on the wrong side of that line. When the meeting closed, Margot went down to the hangar. Sutton was standing by the chassis with his hands in his pockets. The car had been rolled back to its bay. The work lamps were on overhead. She walked over to him and handed him an envelope. He opened it. Inside was not a check. It was a contract. Sutton Wilder, Chief Engineer, Development Program, Halloran Motorsports. There was no driver title attached. He read it twice. "You know I'm not coming back to compete," she said. "I'm not asking. I'm asking you to build. Driving is your decision. Now and later." Sutton folded the contract and slid it into the inside pocket of his coat. He did not say yes. He did not say no. He put his hand on the hood of the car one more time. This time, his hand did not shake. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in late October, the sun was angling low across the new development bay Halloran Motorsports had cleared for him at the back of the R&D building. The garage was not bigger than the one in Statesville. He had asked specifically that it not be. The same yellow work lamps hung overhead. The same metal workbench had been moved up from Statesville. The radio was on. Low, classic country, the kind Eleanor had liked. Jonah sat on the high stool by the bench. He was redrawing a combustion chamber profile Sutton had sketched that morning. He looked up. "Did I get it right this time, Dad?" Sutton did not turn from the bench. "You got it right. I corrected mine off your draft." Jonah did not grin. He nodded, the way men nod to each other in a trade. Margot came in with 2 cups of coffee. She set one down at the corner of Sutton's bench. She kept the other. She did not mention the contract. It had been 2 weeks. The contract had been signed in the 2nd week. There was nothing about it that needed to be discussed. She asked Jonah about his drawing. He explained, again, why the port radius was teardrop-shaped instead of circular. She asked the right technical question. He answered it. She nodded the way an engineer nods. No extra warmth, no false amazement. This time the boy smiled. A small one, but his. Sutton was leaning against the bench, watching them. There was an expression on his face Eleanor would have recognized. Margot did not see it. Jonah asked if he could go out back to watch the chassis on the test rig. Sutton said yes. The boy hopped off the stool, pushed open the side door and was gone. The garage went quiet. Just the 2 of them. Margot set her coffee cup down on the bench. She did not look at him. She said, "I found a note on the back of a photograph last week. My father took it of the 2 of you at Pry in 2018. He wrote on it, 'Best engineer I never hired.' Asked 3 times. Respect his answer. Try again next year." Sutton was quiet. After a while he said, "He asked a 4th time on the phone. 2 months before he died. I was going to say yes that time. I never got around to it." Margot turned her head. It was the first time in the conversation she had looked at him straight on. There was about a meter of bench between them. She set her hand down on the bench, near his, not touching. He did not pull his hand back. He did not move it to meet hers. A long moment. From the back door, Jonah called in, half a laugh in his voice. "Dad, the car's running clean." Sutton did not move right away. Neither did Margot. After a moment, he said low, "Want to come watch?" She nodded. They walked out the back together. He picked up Jonah and set him on his shoulders, even though the boy was getting too big for it. Margot walked next to them, not close. They stood at the edge of the test pad and watched the chassis run smooth in the long Carolina light. The car ran clean, and somewhere in that sound was the memo a man had written, the promise a wife had once kept, and a quiet that, for the first time in 7 years, did not feel like absence.